Hello, Wolf. How are you? There are
Hi.
you in the screen.
Fine.
Before we hello again, yeah. Now for the people watching on YouTube. So before we start, I would like to introduce you properly. But before that, maybe a few words about the event. This is one of the final activities that we are working on in the Institute this winter in a series of events that we call Digital Beast. We already have some of great participants and great interviews like Jesse Reiser and Anna Kumemoto. And we are also having some seminars and courses along all this winter here in Buenos Aires. And what a better way to be finishing all these activities by talking with you. So thank you very much for doing this. I will present you very shortly, and then we will have a conversation. I encourage the people watching this on YouTube to ask questions in the chat box. So in the end, maybe I can read some of the questions of the people watching. So Coop Himmelb was founded in 1968 by Wolf Prix and Helmut Suszynski and Michael Holzer in Vienna, Austria. Since 2001, Wolf Prix is leading the studio as CEO and design principal. Wolf dPrix studied architecture at the Vienna University of Technology, the Architectural Association in London, and the Southern California Institute of Architecture in Los Angeles. He was tenured professor at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna from 1990 to 2011, known as Estudio Prix, and served as chair of the Institute of Architecture and vice-rector from 2003 and 2012. He has held teaching positions at the Architectural Association, MIT, Harvard University, Columbia, and a lot others. Since 1968, Coop Himmelb operated in the intersection between the possible and the impossible, breaking the historic architectural rules on a regular basis. The office pushed and continued to move forward ideas that transcend the theoretical or discursive towards fantasy and a cheerful creativity, that it is always an inspiration for the discipline of architecture as a whole. Well, we're going to have a conversation, and hopefully we can answer some of the questions that you may have through our YouTube channel. So thank you again, Wolf. How are you?
Muy bien. Thank you very much. I'm fine.
Fantastic. So I will start with a simple question. I don't know, but I'm curious to know what are you working on today? What are your day-to-day basis?
Now,
yeah,
try to integrate all the new programs into our work. I'm very skeptical about the artificial intelligence. I would like to rename it to architectural intelligence, and this is what we are working, what we have on our screen. In former times, I would say, this is what I have on the table. Now, I have to say, we have it on the screen right now. This is what we try to develop in the next step of doing architecture.
All right, you're working in AI then. Yes, a couple of months ago, I had the chance to talk to Daniel Boloshan, that is working in Coop Himmelb. It was quite interesting. Is that changing the way you work today?
No. This is how we did it since we started to do architecture. You have to know that my father was an architect, and I learned the basics of architecture when I was a young boy, because I was sitting in his office, and was controlling what he was doing. And then I started architecture. Then I think threw away all the craftsmanship details my father was doing very well, I have to say, and try to find a new way to design or develop a new language in architecture, which is more contemporary than the old guys did it, and still are doing it. Try to pushing the envelope of thinking in architecture. This is what we started to do in '68, actually earlier. But when we founded Himmelb, the goal was to create a new language in architecture.
And can you maybe describe this process of work? Is it the same in general from what you start doing, or it changes radically through time?
No, we take everything what's new in the development of the computer software. We take it as a tool, like we always did. In former times, we did the pen was a tool. Now the screen is the tool. In former times, the triangle was the tool we used to draw, and now it's the mouse or whatever.
Right. Well,
I'm still drawing with hand. We're still using the programs, and now we are experimenting with the new tool. It's called architectural intelligence, because not artificial intelligence, but the architects are intelligent, not the houses are intelligent. I read a lot about intelligent architecture, intelligent houses, intelligent facades. That's not correct. The only guy who is intelligent, this is worse to named intelligence, is the architect, because he is the inventor of the old things.
Right. Well, you like football, right?
Very much so.
Well, once you said, talking about triangles, that you like how the Barcelona football team when Messi was around. So what's that idea of the triangulation that you use in the workflow of your studio?
No, it's the ideas behind all this description is the mental map of Guardiola. He introduced to football many other things than only football, meaning he introduced the technique of basketball and ice hockey and all the things which are played with a book or a ball or whatever. So he developed a new system how to play, a new strategy how to develop ideas to get closer to the goal, closer to the goal. And this is what I like, because we did the same way. When we started to do Himmelb, which is in English sky blue, or in Italian azzurro, meaning it's an idea to get rid of the rigid way of thinking in architecture, meaning grid and proportion. We wanted to let all these things explode and find bits and pieces we can put together in order to develop a new language of creating space. So Himmelblau is not the color, but it's the idea of having architecture changeable like clouds. This was the idea when we started 1968. It's almost, how many years? 60 years ago? 50 years ago, I think.
That's quite a time.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Yeah. So talking about the early days, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go fast here. I would like to ask you about, because you talked in some of the conversations that you have, I research online, about dreams, that in your early days were very important to have dreams, but dreams different to utopia. So can't you explain the difference between dreaming and thinking in an utopian way?
No, if you dream of a new city, this is, and you are not bound to reality while you are sleeping. This is utopian way of thinking. But what we wanted to do, we always wanted to build. This is a very, very important thing, because in the early days, we called ourselves Building Corporation Himmelblau. That points out that we wanted to build our dreams. We want to realize things which are seemingly impossible to realize. So, yeah, this was our dream, and I think in some projects we did in the early days, we were pushing the envelope of the term architecture in very different direction, because what we said, if you only think in architectural terms, only architecture will come out. And this was at this time, 60s, very boring. And I have to say, nowadays it's the same thing. It's very boring to think about architecture in conventional terms, meaning the only goal we have to follow, people say, is the goal of having everything political correct and
yes,
nachhaltig means, nachhaltig is the word for sustainability. And people forget that sustainable is not only to do architecture economically or ecologically, but the third level in sustainable is the cultural and the art which is influencing our society. Or the other way, if the society is stubborn enough, architecture will be stubborn, or art will be stubborn. And this is what we always say, that's the wrong way for the future. It's the wrong direction in the future. All the things, yeah, thinking about economic and thinking about nature and green and things, that's craftsmanship. The goal is to develop a new cultural way of thinking in our society. That's the real sustainability.
And what about this idea of the cloud? You mentioned it just now. Is this idea of no gravity of architecture that you practice for a long time?
Yeah, in our way of thinking, and I think it's always embedded in thinking in architecture, about architecture, is to get rid of gravity. Yeah, look at the Gothic cathedrals. They try to get rid of the gravity. And my example is always, if you look at the chair of Corbusier, yeah, where you are lying in the chair like an astronaut in the space capsule, it's the position we take over when we get rid of the gravity. In the moment when you have to lie like in the chair, like Corbusier in the, I forget the name, it's very important that we think that gravity it's necessary, but to overcome gravity seemingly, and that the dream is that we can fly through the space and get a new experience of space. It is our goal since we started Himmelb, or earlier, I have to say.
And
this was nice images. This is
yes. They are beautiful.
I think is one of the first deconstructivist buildings which were realized.
Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about that once you mention it. This exhibition in 1988, organized by Philip Johnson and Mark Wigley, that put together very prominent architects from the time and that today are very important for the discipline and have built a vast career. Nevertheless, many of them, of the ones that participated in that exhibition, never felt comfortable with the term deconstruction or deconstructivism. What is your approach to that? Do you identify with the idea of deconstruction now or then?
Yeah, but it's not deconstruction in opposite of constructivism. So, but this is deconstructivism, which is different. What is the interpretation of many critics or many architects as well? Our approach to this kind of thinking, to make a long story short, Derrida, who invented this term, was a student of Freud, and Freud was very concerned with the unconsciousness of unconscious way of doing and feeling and in art and architecture as well, not only in philosophy, but also in art and architecture. He said that a lot of things we are doing are driven by our unconsciousness. And whether you like it or not, it's a main structure in our brain or in our work or life, the unconscious part. And what Derrida is saying, that in every piece of art and architecture, or the drawing of architecture, there is a part in the writing written down unconsciously. In a composition, a part is unconsciously done, not driven by the codes and rules which are coming from the outside, but coming from the inside of the artist and the painter, the musician, or the architect. And I think if you are too much influence from the academic way of thinking in architecture. Only academic architecture will come out, and we wanted to get rid of this in order to research in this way of doing architecture, research the unconscious part, which could us allow to invent a new language. This is, I think, a very, very individual interpretation of deconstructivist. Therefore, I like to be in this movement, and I have in this movement deconstructivist architecture, but not in the way the interpretation normally runs, namely that to destroy kind of parts and put it together in another way. That's not our way to do it. It's coming from the emotional approach to liberate space and not put it in an academic grid. So this is
right.
This is a lot. This is a short story of a long interpretation.
But how do you do that? I mean, how do you have any specific technique to get rid of or pause all these academic, because you have a very strong academic background, you have taught everywhere, and how do you detach from all these ideas of academia and maybe some ideas of some conservative ideas about architecture? Do you have any technique to get rid of them and work in a more unconscious way, maybe?
First of all, our academic approach to this, everyone is right, but nothing is correct. So, this is very important. There's the discussion about all these new theories is a very academic discussion. Everyone wants to be the one who has the truth. I don't believe that. I say everything is right, but nothing is correct. That means that the responsibility to do architecture is not against the theory, it's against it's for the people you are planning and yourself as well. So that is close to that I say architecture is not the master of art, but is a part of art. And if the architecture is memorable and you got some new inspiration, if you step into the building, then it's a kind of art. It's not founded on a theory. If you look at the building behind me, that's one of the latest building we realized. That's the museum in China. This is not this one. This also on the left side, but the background. I'm behind me. Yeah.
Yes.
That's a really mixture of all the ideas I got, experienced in my life since I was born in 42. Meaning that all the role models which play a role in my architectural education, like Coop, like Kiesler, like the Renaissance drawer Piranesi, all these things are coming together in this kind of architecture we built in 5, 6, 7 years ago. And this is the real deconstructivistic thing. No thing you can see in this image is a copy of my role models, because my real role model is Keith Richards. How he plays the licks and riffs, getting all the tension in the songs of the Stones, long time ago, but still very powerful. We took this tension and put it into our structures. So if you step into the space, you can see you got a new imagination what architecture can, or space in our times can be. Not ruled by regulations, not ruled codes, not ruled by mathematics, codes and rules of the program of the computer program, but it's really a liberated space. Very hard to get.
In a sense, you are building like a new regulation, right? Like the project has its own regulation, not depending on anything, maybe?
Yeah, that's true. Because we don't believe in regulations, and we let them go, so to say, like he's telling about the music he's playing. He let it go. And if you build it, and I know all the role models in architecture I have, if you step into it, then you have the feeling these guys let it go as well.
Right.
Michelangelo, Corbusier, the only things I like, the only thing I like on Mies van der Rohe is smoking cigars. Not this.
Well, you mentioned Piranesi. I was going to ask you about. I don't know if I can say I can refer to them as references, but maybe some architects in history that influence your work. I'm thinking you mentioned Piranesi regarding the Campo Marzio, right? All these organizations coming together.
No, not the Campo Marzio. This is
okay.
That's not my role model. I like the drawings of the Carcere.
Okay.
Yeah, wrong perspective, bridges which are not reaching to the other.
Not connecting.
Foundation, bridges which are not going to somewhere. It's Carcere. It looks like a Fotokammer, yeah, but it's not a Fotokammer. It's the inspiration of a new, realistic space.
So it's not as much as architects themselves, but some of the work that they do.
Yeah.
Is there another work of history that influenced your work other than Piranesi's Carcere?
Very much Corbusier. Corbusier, the two buildings of Corbusier, the Rochon, not so much, but La Tourette, very much.
Right.
See, this is this is
Go ahead.
what you can see. I don't know whether people can see the model of the museum, of the pavilion on the museum in Groningen.
I'm sure.
Yeah, which doesn't follow any regulation except the regulation of voids and spaces. And even the voids are spaces. And what I like of this thing, that we used a very, very different architectural a very different way to build it, because we got the commission to build it in a very short time in a river, and we found out that at this time the shipbuilders had no work, so it was very cheap to build this part of the museum like a ship. And we did it. We built this whole building, these metal parts, we built it in a shipyard and transported it here and welded together on site. So it was economically done, and inside it gives the idea of open space, like a empty factory, so to say. And in my imagination, I would say that the artists could fill that up, this space, in the way they want to use it. It's not a museum, but it's a point of departure of doing art in a industrial done factory or ship. It's like a ship. It was built like a ship.
I didn't know that. That's great. And well,
and the other thing is, this is also related to Corbusier when he was talking that architecture should be like a ship, the organization. But we did it like a ship. You can see that if you go there. Yeah, these are the first. These are the point of departure was how we can combine voids with filled spaces in order to create a new way of get the experience inside the museum.
Well, I believe that if I'm not wrong, this is, if not the first, one of the first projects in which you started working with computers, using 3D scanning and digital drawing. How do you think that informed the design that you were working till then? It changed in any way? It added a layer of complexity, maybe?
No. The program of the computers are never ruling our ideas. We use the computer to realize our ideas.
Right.
That's still our goal. Yeah. And when the drawing, like what we are doing now, if I make a drawing, and put it into the architectural intelligence program, then the outcome is not a fixed architectural piece, but it's the point of departure of an upcoming architecture. Like we did it here. Yeah, this is the first drawing of the cinema center in Germany. This is not an architectural drawing. It's a point of departure of maybe how the structure could run through the whole building, and so forth, and so forth. It's only an inspiration, like my hand drawings are only inspiration of the upcoming architecture. It was always like that. And the second thing, which is different to now, is in the architectural discussion, that we always work on a working model. We see the model not as a result, but it's a process of developing the upcoming three-dimensional building. And that doesn't work on the computer. It only works on the handmade working model. But then we use every of the advantages of these programs in order to realize it.
Well, something interesting about your line of thought regarding the digital is that in computers there's no gravity, right? So maybe there is a space of work that may interest you.
But
in fact,
imagination, there is no gravity at all. I have to train the computer to think the way we are thinking. It's not only my way, because, and therefore I like the team playing of Guardiola's Barcelona as well. That because our work in the office is the same way how the 11 people are playing the football game. We pass these ideas and playing around, and then maybe there is someone to say, okay, that's it, that's the goal. We are leading 5-0.
Right. It's like you're searching a way to get into the area, to the
teamwork.
Exactly. Well, I always wanted to ask you, because there's a moment in time in your practice where, in a sense, you start shifting from breaks and angles in the morphology of your architecture. I don't know if you started shifting, but you added more continuous and soft curves, and not only these straight and break angles as we can saw in the cinema in Germany or the Groninger Museum. So do you agree with that? Was your practice in some point, maybe when you were working in this museum or even the BMW Welt, where curves and continuous surfaces enter the discussion of the form in your office?
The programs. If you look at our drawings from '68, there are a lot of curves and very organic points of departure. But we didn't know at this time how we can build it in an economic way. Meaning, if people say, oh, it's so, curves are so expensive, they cost more. We needed programs who helped us to calculate and draw these curves in an economic way. This is the parametric things. Then later on, the AI helps us to make it buildable. That's the only reason I use it. See, these are soft drops as well. And this helps us. This, for instance, these drops coming down helps us to reduce the steel structure in 1/3 in weight, and therefore the whole steel structure of the crystal at the entrance costs only 1/3 of a very conventional method. Is that understandable?
Yeah.
By using it and calculate that, the whole, yes, you see that the whole structure, the weight of the whole structure reduces, the method reduces the weight of the structure 1/3, therefore the whole structure costs 1/3 less than a conventional, if we would have columns in the middle. Therefore, we use it. Not because I don't need to have artificial intelligence to get new shapes and new spaces. It's It's easy to invent new spaces, but it's hard to build.
Right.
You see, the best and the next step is the combination. Go back to the last image. Yeah. No. Next. Yeah. You see how the curves, how the sharp edges get into curves, soft curves, and the combination of soft and hard creates a new kind of formal language in our office. You see it in the background as well.
Yeah, in fact, that's something that's quite unique from Coop Himmelb, this combination of breaks and right angles with curvature, right? There, you have offices that do curvature, or you have offices that do breaks and angles, and you do like both, and the combination is quite interesting because I believe that the idea of something floating softly next to something hard and square makes it like a more powerful effect.
Yeah, it's a new language. I have to say, the Gothic and sometimes in other buildings you can see that as well. Yeah. Corbusier did it long time ago as well. Tries to combine it, like in Rochon, these curves of the roof at the heavy base of the space inside. Yeah.
And I was wondering,
it's also,
yeah,
money is always a very decisive part of the discussion whether it will be built or not. And if you can prove that this kind of shape doesn't cost, let's say, more than a conventional thing, but it creates a more value in the excitement of experience the space, then then maybe you get the commission to build it. Yeah, this is the same. Yeah?
And you, because the question was regarding what was architecture back in the 60s when you started, and what is architecture now? You were thinking in all of these things back then, or that idea of architecture changed over experience in time?
My architecture, no, I'm still thinking that if the architecture only fulfills one of the rules of economic rules, namely sustainability. If you go deeper into the word sustainability, so it's a very economic argumentation, yeah? We use the material which doesn't cost nothing and could be planted, blah, 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 like wood. Then you lose what in architecture, what I mean is the most important thing in this term, sustainability. I mentioned it before, meaning that our society needs a three-dimensional culture as well. And that couldn't be only a gridded box. Maybe it's the right expression for this stupid society, which is now doing politics around the world, maybe. But we would like to show that there's other escapes also, which are more important than just to fulfill the economic rules and regulations. For instance, everyone is talking about that concrete steel, glass, very dangerous materials because of CO2. And no one calculates right now what a day, in the Ukraine war, now how many tons of CO2 is exploding per day now in the Ukraine war. It's like the people say, okay, your museums, they cost that much, we can build 10 schools or whatever for that.
Yeah.
That they oversee that the value of the museum or the expensive of the museum are mainly the same like a warfighter costs, namely
Right.
100 million euro. And this warfighter, a museum is a medium to communicate our knowledge to another generation. And a warfighter, a fighter, airplane fighter, is destroying things. And the museum is building up communication. So we have to find a real comparison of what we are thinking. And, and architects say 40% of the CO2 explosion, we have to, the architects are responsible. We have the responsibility. I'm losing the language right now. I should.
No, it's okay. It's perfect. I understand. Well, in that sense, what do you think? Because you are a reference in terms of landmarks. I mean, every building you made for the last 20, 30 years has become a landmark in the city where it's implanted. So what do you think it's the role of an architectural landmark, not only for architecture, but for culture of the city, of the country itself?
Identification. Identification.
All right.
If you are, this is very important. If I plan a city, the whole city would not look like this building. Of course not, because this is a museum, has another organization than an apartment building. But this building gives the whole area identification. And
right.
And if you are living in this part, then you can describe where you are living. And this is very important. If you can describe, I'm living in this house who has a red hat, and the number is 27, and I'm living in this level. You can see the glass balcony. This is where I'm living, and this is very important for architects to create identification. Otherwise, you are losing identification, and then you are losing liveliness as well.
And what do you feel about more domestic space? I know you lately have built more cultural buildings, but you have experience building residence housing, for example.
We did it as well in Vienna, and we planned a lot of things. We will come up in China or in Saudi Arabia. We are always concerned to do that, to give a kind of fulfilling all the technical terms like infrastructure, which is very important, but to give the people their own identification, the possibility to create their own identification. We always, if we do apartments, we always do lofts, because we say it's not my competence to create apartments like I would to have it. They should, the people who are living there should have the possibility to create their own imagination.
Right, but you are influencing in some way, in a more like intimate way, when you are proposing like a place to live, right? I mean, these spaces, these cultural spaces, operates in a more general level, maybe in a level of identification of a bigger place, maybe a city, a country, but with housing you are operating in a very in a smaller range, right?
Yeah, of identification. If they need help, and then I will help them to create what they want. But that takes a lot of time and a lot of sensibility, of both sides. Yeah? But basically, we always plan apartments as empty spaces. Only the infrastructure. Yes. We are planning.
Well, you said you don't believe in conventions, but I'm sure you should have to fight in order to be able to build this architecture. I think that you always, your ideas were confronting the status quo of the moment, and I'm sure you have to fight with some of the, I don't know, not only academia, but the competitions, or the idea of the competition, and so on. So I wanted to ask you if that changed through the years. I mean, are you still fighting the same way you fought 20 or 30 years ago, or things are changing towards a more open architectural thinking or cultural thinking towards new types of spaces and environments?
I'm not that naive anymore, and I got more experience. Can I have the image? The Jan image. I show you soon. I will implant image. You have to. I have to show you. It shows exactly what we are fighting for. But I got more experience. I know much more how to build the things in an economic way. Our buildings are very well organized since we started to build. All the museum have a very well acknowledged by the public. And this is an advantage to argue. But if it comes to in a competition, we always lose if I cannot explain what's behind the things. Because people cannot read the models, and they don't read it in the way they should read it. And they will read it if it's built. If I can explain it personally. Look.
Wait, I cannot see. We have to change the screening.
Wait a minute, then I show you the dilemma of the architects today. Not only today, but always. Hold on a second.
Okay, I see.
See it?
Yeah.
Come to us and say, I want to have the most exciting building you can imagine. We want to have an iconic building. We want to have that everyone, the talk of the town, and blah, 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 blah. And if it comes to the budget, you can see the most exciting tiger becomes a street cat. And the guy who's very elegant is a little guy now with the clothes of the slums. Can you? So we are going back. But this is a very, very important thing you have to teach the clients, the students, that they have to learn the strategy, how to get through with their ideas by argument in many ways.
Right.
But we did a building, we did a plan for a building in Vienna for the Viennese energy department, and we planned a high-rise with a facade which can produce their own, it was 92, their own energy, so that they don't have to buy energy. And they said, when I presented it, they said, such a nonsense, we don't need 92.
Right.
We didn't build it. It could be an example of how to make facades. So that happens to us right now as well. But if we can, the chance, the anonymous competition, the winning entry depends on the cleverness of the jury. One, firstly, and secondly, we never ever get through the technical improvement of the jury, because they don't know how clever we can build structures like these. Richard are playing the tensioned riffs, and we have a very good structural engineer, my friend Klaus Bollinger, and me. We are unbeatable to invent impossible structures, but they can be built and they can be built economically. That's one of the arguments. The other one is now energy, but this is, we know since we are building, because all our buildings not only produces energy in order to manage themselves, the energy amount, but we always think building, for instance, this building plan, which are using 30% less energy than the codes and rules are asking for, because it is craftsmanship. So the greenwashing of nowadays, that's craftsmanship of the architects. Sometimes it's ridiculous, sometimes it works very well. And we are very, very interested in to use what the computer helps us nowadays is not to create a facade, but it helps us to study the wind force, the sun, study the geothermal issues. This is what we can study on the computer, to turn around the building in order to catch the wind for the cooling, or to reduce the resilience to the wind power in order to reduce the structural design.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much more. I just we're almost reaching the hour, so I wanted to thank you. And I didn't say this before in order not to distort the nature of the conversation, but you are surely an inspiration. You were an inspiration for me and my generation, studying architecture and growing up, having the opportunity to get to know about your buildings and your work. So I want to end this conversation by asking you, what do you think architecture should be doing right now? I mean, what do you think the role of architects are right now in the world? What should be doing?
To make things impossible possible. Think about how we can change the world with our knowledge, without being submissive against the problems, that solves the problem. This is what I would give to all the to the students. Trust yourself. You can do it. Don't be coward.
That's great. That's great. That's a very great advice. So I think we're done. I don't want to take much of your time. So thank you very much, Wolf, for doing this. I hope we can talk again soon.
Hopefully. And I like Buenos Aires, and sometimes I was there a long time ago, and I like the city very much. I have to say, I would love to come maybe sometimes before I'm too old to get into. Ciao, ciao.